Hello, fourth grade. Let's get started on this week's story. This week, we are working on a text that is an informational article. And if you read this page in front of you, the name of our text is going to be Where It All Began. Now, an informational article is nonfiction. It provides you with information and facts about people, places, and things. And it also includes text features, which we will read through once we are finished reading the main text. So Where It All Began is an informational article that gives you facts about the history of Jamestown and the people who live there. This article also has text features, including a map and a sidebar. Now, as we read this, some of it might sound familiar to you because we did cover some of this information in social studies. Okay, let's go back to the story. Okay, Where It All Began. And just like I did last week, I am going to read the whole story to you so that at any time you can come back to the video if you need to hear the lesson again. But for this one, we are also working on sequencing. And remember from last week, sequencing is when the author writes the text in time order. So you are going to be looking for words that tell us time is going by and also dates. The author will be using dates to show the passage of time. All right, let's look at our first heading. Take a tour of Jamestown, Virginia, the birthplace of America. How many of you remember that, learning that in social studies? Jamestown was the first settlement when the people came over from England, where they decided to build their first colony. They thought they were lost. The Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery had sailed from London, England, on December 20th, 1606. The expedition was bound for Virginia, carrying 144 people. Finally, on April 26, 1607, the ship sailed into Chesapeake Bay. In the words of one voyager, they found fair meadows and goodly tall trees. On an island in a river, they built a fort and named it after their king, James. Jamestown would become the first successful permanent English settlement in the New World. Okay, our second heading, the struggle to survive. There is a proverb that says, ignorance is bliss. In the case of the 104 men and boys who came ashore, this was true. They were faced with a tremendous challenge. The water from the James River was not safe to drink, and the food was scarce. 2 weeks after the settlers arrived, 200 Indians attacked them. All right, I want to go over something before we turn the page. The word ignorance is bliss. How many of you know what ignorance means? Ignorance means that you don't know about something. So when they went on to this new island, they knew nothing about what they were going to find. And bliss means happy. So they were going in not knowing anything, and they were happy about that. Unfortunately, when they finally got there, they did have these problems of the dirty water, hardly any food, and then the Indians attacking them. Okay, let's move on. John Smith, an experienced military man, became head of the colony in 1608. He had been in charge of finding local tribes willing to swap food for English copper and beads. Smith was tough with both the Indians and Englishmen. He that will not work shall not eat, he told the colonists. Smith knew that an attitude of every man for himself would endanger the colony. The western Chesapeake area was ruled by Chief Powhatan, who governed an empire of 14,000 Algonquin-speaking peoples. His daughter, Pocahontas, became a useful friend and ally to John Smith. So, how many of you recognize that name, Pocahontas? We also talked about her. So, John Smith was the one that was kind of in charge of everybody that was coming off the ship, kind of like a governor. And he met with Chief Powhatan, who was in charge of the 14,000 Native Americans. Pocahontas actually became a friend to John Smith and kind of worked things out between the Englishmen and the Native Americans. So let's look, before we move on, let's look at a text feature up there at the top, that picture. The caption says, Pocahontas saved the life of Captain John Smith. So, not quite sure how that happens, but she was an ally, a friend to him. Now, at the bottom, this separate text is called a sidebar. So it's connected to what the main text is about. So this one is called The Real Life Pocahontas. Princess Moataqua was born around 1595. Her father, Chief Powhatan, called her Pocahontas. She saved John Smith's life twice, and he wrote that Pocahontas's wit and spirit were unequaled. Pocahontas married a planter named John Rolfe, the first marriage in that era between an Englishman and a Native American woman. Rolfe, Pocahontas, and their son visited London. She never returned home. She fell ill aboard a ship bound for Jamestown in March of 1617 and died. So that little sidebar there about Pocahontas basically is giving you a summary of her life, telling you some important things that had happened to her in her lifetime. Okay, let's go up to the map on the next page. This is also a text feature. And if you look at the map key, that will tell you what the different symbols mean. If you're looking at the green arrow, that is the immigration for the English, the French, the Italians, the Poles, and the Africans. That's how they came in to Jamestown. And the orange part, that's the extent of the European settlement in the 1700s. Anywhere you see a black circle is a village. The black square is a fort. The triangle you see is an Indian reservation where the Native Americans lived. And the star is where the capital of Jamestown was, and Virginia. All right, our last heading is Taking a Closer Look. Archaeologists digging in Jamestown have discovered Indian artifacts along with English ones. Evidence that Indians lived in the fort for some time. It must have been a very close relationship, says William Kelso, an expert in colonial American archaeology. Kelso has worked for 10 years to document this site. His team has managed to uncover more than 1 million artifacts and has mapped out the fort's shape, its foundation, and its burial ground. Jamestown left a record of greed and war, but it was also the start of a representative government. The settlers gave America a solid foundation to build upon. So in this last section, we're talking about archaeologists. And if you remember, archaeology is the study of the past. So an archaeologist is a person that studies the past. And he studied some things in Jamestown that he was able to dig up. So even though years ago Jamestown had a war and a lot of people died, it was the very beginning of our country and our government. All right, I want to go back so we can talk about sequencing, because some of your work that you guys did last week, you had trouble identifying what would come next after something else had happened, and you didn't identify some of the dates that were in your last text. So if we go back to our first page, the first two paragraphs How do you know that time has gone by? Look at it carefully. What did the author use to show time passing by? Okay, so if you said dates, you were correct. Because here we say that the ship sailed December 20th in 1606. And then he says finally is a transition word, April 26, 1607. So time has now passed. We're several months later. Okay, now let's go to the next page. I'm going to get rid of those. See if on this page, 368, what on this page tells us that he is writing in sequential order, in time order. Very good. If you said 1608 right there, you are correct. Now another year has passed by. So that is how the author is showing you sequence, time order. Now for our last heading on page 369, this one's not so easy. He didn't use a date. But there's a word there that gives you a clue that tells you we're no longer talking about the past. It's in the first paragraph. Does anybody have any idea? Okay, the word actually is archaeologist. Because if you think to yourself, an archaeologist is a person that studies the past. So if he's studying the past, he can't be in the past. He's actually now in the present time. So that tells you we are in a completely different time frame. We are now in the present instead of the past. Okay, I am going to clear that off. Now, what you are going to do, very similar to what you did last week. We posted for you a completely different story. It's entitled The Eastern Influence. Now, it's also about history, but you need to read that passage that Mr. Moskal had put up for you. It's not part of this video. It is 2 pages. And then you have 3 questions to answer. Please get the answers from the Eastern Influence text, not from the one that I have just read to you. I think some of you had difficulty with that last time. And remember, look for dates to tell you that time is going by. Make sure you're reading all of your text features, whether it's a map, a caption, or the sidebar there like we read about Pocahontas. All of them contain information. Okay? Remember, at any time, we still have Moby Max. You can be working on those skills. We are checking. There are a few of you that are doing some work. Also, you can go back into the Wonders program, listen to this story, and listen to a couple other stories that are listed there this week. All right, great job. Keep it up. Bye.